When business is tough, when those sales are declining, when you've got problems paying your bills on time, you're going to be more conscious of costs. And understandably, you're going to think of ways that you can reduce those costs. When things are much better, when the seas of your business landscape are calmer, when sales are growing, when it feels things are much more prosperous, then costs and considering them tends to go on the back burner. And that's the wrong way to look at it. In last week's I Hate Numbers video, I looked at the situation about when you should be thinking about cost challenges and reducing them. My viewpoint is it should be a continual activity. Number two, how we approach that and take up a framework. So it's worthwhile checking out last week's video, folks, to get a framework about how we approach a cost reduction, a streamlining exercise. In this week's video, I'm going to focus more so about some practical steps we can do going forward and how we can go about actually reducing and challenging the costs in our business organisation. Hi folks, my name is Mahmood. I'm a business finance coach, accountant and tax advisor and author of the book, I Hate Numbers. My mission over the last 28 plus years has been helping aspiring business owners make more money, who doesn't want that, have the business lifestyles they aspire to, increase their level of financial awareness, reduce their stress and anxiety, plan it, do it, profit are my watchwords. Let's crack on with the video. Now, there's a few essential things that we need to get in place if we're going to successfully reduce and manage the costs in our organisations. As a side note, folks, by the way, I tend to look at costs because it's good for the framework, it's good for our mentality in our mind to look at costs as resources we are deploying to advance our business forward, to run our business, to operate that business, to deliver goods and services to the betterment of our customers. Now, how should we think about cost cutting? Now, certain things we should not do under any circumstances. To have a knee-jerk reaction to slash and burn, cutting costs because they look quite high, without any sense of purpose, any sense of connecting to our vision and our objectives is a reckless act. Obviously, if bailiffs are knocking at the door and it's desperate measures, then obviously that's a slightly different mentality. But we're talking about even those times are challenging, slash and burn, knee-jerk reaction of cutting costs without thinking about the consequences is a dangerous and foolish thing to do. Rather like that old cliche phrase about cutting off your nose to spite your face, you could find by cutting costs which might benefit you in the short term could have a long-term detriment on the business survivability and sustainability. So always have in mind, what are the objectives in your organisations? What's your end point? What's your end goal? Everything you do that goes towards that may be reducing ambition, but the costs that you incur, the resources that you deploy have to be incurred in order for you to achieve that purpose. Number two, we have good costs, we have bad costs. So the first thing we should do is to make sure you assemble and understand what your current costs actually are and what your future expected costs will be. Break them down ideally, the ones that are associated with the specific product or services that you deliver. Make sure you've identified which costs are the support cost variety. We might use the term overhead, but which costs support you in your business endeavours and which costs are incurred directly with the delivery of the product or the service as well. Now, having identified what they are, trawl your data systems, your accounting systems, capture that information, look at it what they have been historically and project what they are likely to be in the future in order for you to achieve that end objective. And then go through ruthlessly, challenge those costs that you've got and challenge them. The bad costs that add no value, the costs that do nothing to support your business, the costs that we sometimes incur, like subscriptions, like monthly costs here, we think they're quite small, we pay the bills for those, they remain unnoticed and they compound and build up to quite a large effect. So that's the first thing we can take our pruning shears to. Get rid of those non-value added, what I call the bad costs. Number two, do we have an idea of can we get better prices? Can we get better costs incurred? And that means approaching suppliers and it means a negotiation framework. Many business owners that I meet are quite timid, quite wary of talking to suppliers and discussing with them the opportunities for getting discounts or reductions on their buying in price. looking for alternatives. That's not to say you should drop your suppliers straight away. It means you need to have that constant dialogue, have that conversation with them. It may mean that if you commit yourself to more orders, you may get a discount on those purchases. Is that something that could benefit from you? If it's a supply that you require on a constant basis, then getting some level of discounting in there by having larger purchases may be an option. If you're making a product, are there things that you can do to re-engineer that product? Things that you can take off that product that doesn't add any value to the customer, doesn't impact their experience, and therefore you can eliminate those from that. So redesign, reconfiguration, reconsideration can go a long way. Have a look in terms of where your costs are going, and then again, have that conversation thinking, are there ways that I can reduce that burden? And there are two ways that you can do that. If you look at a cost for something, it's typically made up of how much you need of that resource and how much you're paying for each unit of that particular commodity. So let's take the area of energy. Now, at the time of recording this video, energy prices are still quite high. Now, we can't necessarily influence how much we pay for each term, each kilowatt hour, but we can certainly do something about the consumption of that resource. So using less kilowatt hours, using less energy, perhaps by making sure the building that we have is well ventilated, making sure we turn off unnecessary lights, making sure we don't overuse, making sure we calibrate, making sure machinery and equipment is well serviced, means we consume less energy, which means we pay less overall for the energy bills that we have. And do the same for other commodities that you have. So whether it's paper, how much you're using that, is there the opportunity to go for digitization? More of that in a few moments. So look at the resources that you're consuming. Focus your attention on certainly the bigger numbers here, but don't ignore the smaller numbers either. A saving of £5 or £10, £15 per week here compounds over a year to be quite a significant sum of money. If we accumulate all of that, that could be quite a good cost saving. Now, in terms of achieving these goals, it's absolutely essential that we create a cost culture within our team. And what that means is we don't unilaterally just cut costs without consideration of others. We involve our team because they are at the sharp end of things. They may be able to spot opportunities that we don't realise are there. We could incentivise them by saying for every £100 that's saved, by that suggestion that's implemented, we will give you a bonus, we will give you a financial reward of X. It's a win-win situation. Employees can identify opportunities for saving money, for doing things better, streamlining the processes, and thereby saves some money as well. Now, the last couple of things I want you to consider is this idea of automation. Now, automation can potentially be a good time saver, can potentially save us money in terms of labour input costs, and also free up time and capacity for us to go out there and win more business, for us to work on our business. But what you've got to do is you've got to understand the flow through, and things like flowcharts that document a process, for example, in the customer onboarding journey, from the stranger to delivery to invoicing. Understand what the process is involved, identify the steps and activities, and then we can look at the resources required and think, there is an opportunity here for us to automate the whole process, to automate some of it. Do you have duplicated systems in your organisation? If so, that's the time to merge and streamline. The other key area that lots of people look at is in the context of staff headcount there as well. Now, I'm not a personal believer of straight away cutting a headcount, reducing staff numbers, because that could be a short-term saving potentially, but it can also be very demotivating for the team that's left behind, and it may not be positive going forward. So look at where your staff are spending their time. Look at terms of if their staff are being used for a very specialised skill and you only have a very small requirement for them, can they be redeployed to do something else? Can you outsource that particular function and save some money on that respect? But think carefully what your business needs, and do not just cut and run. Do not just cut costs, because if you're reducing capacity, you're reducing the ability to deliver value to your customers, then that is going to be very dangerous in the long term. Other things you should consider: look at the trend, understand what your costs are, benchmark yourself against other people in your industry to see if you're as efficient as you can be. But create the climate, Create that culture of cost consciousness, involve your team, understand what your costs are, understand the good costs, understand the bad costs, and thereby you'll contribute then to make an overall saving. Set yourself a time frame, incentivize, and do things on a micro step basis. Folks, I hope you got some value from this video. What do you think? Do you have any tips to share about where costs can be managed, costs can be reduced and cut, made more efficient? If so, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Make sure you keep subscribed for future episodes, and if you've got any suggestions for a future video that you'd like done, then kindly let me know. And until next week, folks, I'll see you on the other side.